Occultures, Unscreened Matrix. Once it was said that there are no shadows in cyberspace. Now cyberspace has its own shadow, its dark twin, the crypt. Cybergothic finds the deep past in the near future. In electronic fusion between digital data systems and iron ocean ionic seething, it unearths something older than natural mortality, something it calls unlife or artificial death. Of a death there can be no lucid recollection, but only suggestion, seepage, hints. And it is by collating, sifting, and shuffling together these disparate clues that a pattern can be induced to emerge, a pattern which ultimately condenses into the looming, tangled shapes of subtle but implacable destiny. Sprawling beneath public cyberspace lies the labyrinthine underworld of the datacoms, ghost stacks of sedimented virtuality, spiraling down abysmally into paleo-digital soft chatter from the punch card regime, through junk programming, forgotten crypto-cultures, fossil codes and dead systems, regressively decaying into pseudo-mechanical clicking relics of techno-tomb clockwork. It is deeper still, amongst the chthonic switchings, cross-hatchings, and spectral diagrammatics of unborn abstract machines, that you pick up the main flat line into the crypt. The crypt is a splitting, a distance or a departure, and it is vast. Nested into the cascading tick shelves, it propagates by contagion, implexing itself through intricate terraces, galleries, ducts, and crawl tubes, as if an extraterrestrial megamodule had impacted into the chalk-out data cliffs, spattering them with scorch punctures and intestinally complicated iridium body parts. As it pulses, squirms, and chitters to the inhuman rhythms of ceaseless K-goth carnival, it reminds you that Catajungle was never reducible to a sonic subgenre, but was always also a terrain, a sub-Cartesian region of intensive diagonals cutting through non-geometric space, where time unthreads into warped voyages, splintering the soul. Contemplating these immense vistas, it seems woundingly implausible that they are mere simulation, supported by quantic electron distribution in the telecommercial fabric. Down here, it makes more sense the other way, from the outside, or Lemuria. Strip out everything human, significant, subjective, or organic, and you approach raw K-matrix, the limit plane of continuous cessation, or unlife, where cosmic reality constructs itself without presupposition, in advance of any natural order, and exterior to established structures of time. On this plane you are impossible, and because it has no end, you will have ultimately always found, that you cannot be, except as a figment of terminal passage, an illusion of waiting to be changed for Cthulhuid continuum of destratified hypermatter at zero intensity. This is what A-death traffic accesses, and what is announced by the burned meat smell, freighted with horrible compulsion, that drifts up to you from the zombie dens. So you continue your descent into the crypt core, scavenging for an A-death hit. As you pass erratically through exchanges, participations, and partial coalesce scenes with the ghoul packs of the periphery, you change. Swarms and shoals include you, drawing you into the collective fluencies, tidal motions, and the tropisms of multiplicity. You shed language like dry skin, and your fear becomes peculiarly abstracted, metamorphosing into the tranquil horror of inevitability. You pass across tiered platforms and along strobe corridors painted in multi-layered shadow, passing swirling dot drifts and plex marks, subchromatic coilings of blue-gray continuous variation, involving you in cumulations and dispersions of subtly shifting, semi-intelligent shade pattern. The teeming surfaces tell of things, inextricable from a process of thinking that no longer seems your own, but rather impersonal undertow in audible chattering, click-hiss turmoil of xenomic diagrams and crypt-culture traffic signs, which are also Lemurian pandemonium. Order becomes uncertain. It feels later. Is it only now that you meet the zombie maker swathed in shimmering reptile skin and obscenely eager to trade? A chimeric cash money will do. You sit in the coma bay and wait. A glimpse at the toxin-flecked bags of the giant thanatonic centipede, consecrated to Ixodad. Then a sudden pain jolt at the back of the neck where the spine plugs into the brain. Instantaneous paralysis and crossing over. Even if you thought it was the first time you remember, the worst thing in the world. Fake eternities of stationary descent to the impossible, cross-cut by disintegrated furies of neuroelectric death hurt. An anonymous panic of inconceivable intensity swallowed by slow drowning, until you are gone, or stranded in a halo of intolerable feeling, which is the same and cannot be, so that what is forever caught in the dark Thulhoid wave is a mere twist or fold of itself, carried, unresisting, into immensities of real unbeing. And nothing could ever happen except this. So say the K-Goths. Occultures, the Unlife of the Earth. Letter from Carl Gustav Jung to Echidna Stillwell, dated 27th February, 1929. Extract. Your attachment to a Lemurian cultural strain disturbs me intensely. From my own point of view, based on the 3 most difficult cases I have encountered and their attendant abysmally archaic symbolism, it is no exaggeration to state that Lemuria condenses all that is most intrinsically horrific to the racial unconscious, and that the true Lemurians, who you seem intent upon rediscovering, are best left buried beneath the sea. I agree with the theosophical writings at least this far. It was in order that the darkest sorceries should be erased by deluge that this continent of cultural possibility has been placed under the unconscious sign of definitive submergence. I know little enough about the nature of those that populated that cursed zone, but there are things I suspect, and the line of your own researches confirms my most ominous intimations. There is no evidence of a reply to this letter. Who were these 3 difficult cases? One at least seems, at least superficially, to be readily identifiable as Heidi Kurzweil. In September 1908, Kurzweil was detained in a secure psychiatric institution after the brutal murder of her twin brother in Geneva. She seemed to have lost the ability to use the first-person pronoun and was diagnosed as suffering from dementia praecox, or schizophrenia. At her trial, she repeatedly claimed, "We killed half to become one twin, but it wasn't enough." Jung took an early interest in the case and began a series of analytical sessions. Kurzweil, in Jung's journal and correspondence, became Heidi K., but after only 5 weeks he seems to have abandoned hope of progress and disengaged the analytic process. After his third session with Heidi K., exactly 20 years prior to his Stilwell letter, on the 27th February 1909, Jung records the following words: "Dr. Jung, we know you are old in your other body. It is as old as hell. It has let you back, but it sends us away. It feels itself becoming Lemurian, and it is definite Unlife. Es ist bestimmt Unleben. There is nothing we would not do to escape. Nothing, nothing, nothing. But it is fate. It howls electric bliss beneath our cells. It is nowhere in time, and nothing's us. It is the body of nothing and electric hot, an electric nothing body instead of us." In this instance, at least, there is little indication of the abysmally archaic symbolism Jung promises us. On the contrary, there is remarkable affinity with the hypermodern writings of K-Goth artificial death cultists documented elsewhere. The K-Goth crypt texts show a marked preference for anonymous pronouns with a collective second or third person, whilst spiraling about a nullifying electric excruciation traversed in the name of Lemuria. In the words of one anonymous crypt posting, "We burn each time but forget. When we begin, each time it comes back, and no one would do it then, but it is too late. We cross over again into electric burning, but forget that it hurts in the brain to die this way. It takes so long to learn that it is grating apart and burning, that dying is felt in the brain, and that it is horrible. It is so horrible to feel, but then we forget, so it can happen again. Metal body screaming to die in electricity. Metallic microparticle sex that is of unlife and not of the organism." This is what the zombie maker brings with the digital centipede bite, and we are hooked up to it, because coming the other way is Lemuria. Incessant, intolerable feeling, passing forever, approaching from the outside, and feeling nothing continuously. Occultures. What didn't happen at the Millennium? Iris Carver is at first amused to discover that the cyber-goths treat her as fiction. Numerous crypt texts describe her near-future adventures in hallucinatory detail, especially when they intersect with the dark stream of Sarkhan legend. Naturally enough, she intensifies her time cult research. When she finally meets Sarkhan in 2004, she has forgotten almost everything. Pandemonium. What didn't happen at the Millennium? There was something peculiar about writing this book. At times she thought it would never be finished. The Sarkhan stories had been full of holes, which added to the confusion. Eventually she started making things up, but even that became entangled with coincidence and with cybergoth hyperstition, assembled from fictional quantities which make themselves real. She had found herself investigating various Neo-Lemurian cults, most of whom anticipated something huge around about the 1999 spring equinox, when Pluto exits from the clutch of Neptune, triggering the return of the Old Ones. By the end of the century, things had been so wound up by yetic apocalypticism that even the most extravagant socio-economic turmoil would still have been a disappointment. And yet, now, 4 years after the millennium, the sense of anticlimax had begun to seem strangely artificial, as if it were screening something out. Carver has made her whole life out of hyperstition. Even her name is a pseudonym. She continuously returns to the imperceptible crossing where fiction becomes time travel, and the only patterns are coincidences. Her notes on the Sarkon meeting pulse with Lemurian sorceries, demonic swarms, ageless time wars, and searches for the limbic key. She navigates Merbe's circuits, feeling that a vaguely recollected rumor is still about to occur. Occultures. Appendix. Penultimillenial Crypt-Cults. Characteristics. 1. Flatline materialism. The crypt is nothing outside an experiment in artificial death, hyperproduction of the positive zero plane, neuroelectronic immanence invested by a continually reanimated thanatechnical connectivism. This fact carries inevitable consequences for the cultures that populate it, uprooting them into unlife, or the non-zone of absolute betweenness, whose spirodynamics of sorcerous involvement are alone sufficient to reach the submesh tracts of cyber-gothic continuum. Flatline materialism designates the objectless crypt voyage itself as Lemurian body fusion at matter degree 0. 2. Digital hyperstition. Nothing propagates itself through the crypt without realizing the operational identity of culture and machinery, effectively dismantling the organic body into numerizing particles which swarm and dislocate its worlds. Crypt entities are both hypervortical singularities and units of digital hyperstitions, or brands of the outside, real components of numerical fictions that make themselves real, providing the practical matter of sorcery, spirogenesis, or productive involvement that function consistently with the flat line. Crypt cultures know nothing of work or meaning. Instead, they coincide with the hype spirals. Cyberhype, that flattens signs and resources onto non-signifying triggers, diagrams, and assembly jargons. 3. Lesbo-vampiric contagion libido. Crypt sorcery makes itself real in the same way that it spreads. Functioning as a plague, it associates with the experimental production of an anticlimactic or anorgasmic countersexuality, attuned to the collective re-engineering of bodies with technobiotic assemblages, ultimately composed of electronic streams or ionic currents in their sense of positive whole flow. Since crypt sex is precisely identical to the infections it transmits, counted in body-shifting vectors, its libidinal composition is marked both by a paleoembryonic or estrogenetic non-gendered femininity, and a lateral hemometallic influenzoid virulence. 4. Y2K positive calendric agitation. Crypt-cultures spill into the closed economy of history through a rupture in chronological ordering, punctually triggered at time 0. Crypt rumor consistently allocates its own contemporary emergence, or unearthing, to impending millennial cyberskids. Cyberspace time disintegration under the strategically aggravated impact of Y2K missile. Whilst multiply differentiated, most crucially by the division between continuism and sentience, crypt-cults are constitutively involved in a singular nexus of counter-Gregorian calendric subversion, celebrating the automatic redating of the machinic unconscious and hyping the dissolution of commemorative significance into digital time mutation, catalyzed by numerical and indexical operative signals. The crypt exists from before the origin of time, but it begins at year 0.